Hello, how are y'all doing? Welcome to another edition of Cool Fish's Happy Hour. I'm Bob Peters, and I'm going to be making a couple cocktails for you that are easy, so that you, in the safety of your own home, can have a couple of drinks for happy hour, right? I have been doing this now for about 2 weeks, and we have had a ton of fun. And we have gone over a bunch of cocktails. Yesterday we did an aviation as well as a daiquiri on the sour vein. In the sour family we had those two cocktails. So what I wanted to do today was something similar that we did yesterday. Sort of by accident, kind of on purpose. I did two cocktails and they both had one similar ingredient in it, but it was like a sub-ingredient. It wasn't the main ingredient. They both weren't gin cocktails. They each had Luxardo maraschino liqueur in it. So that got me thinking about what other cocktails had some minor ingredients in common. And I thought about two of my favorite classics, a Corpse Reviver, number 2, and then also a Sazerac, which is one of Alex's favorite drinks. And they both have absinthe in them. So I thought, what a perfect way to sort of tie this all in. But before I get started, I want to make sure that everybody understands what we're doing here today. So if you guys have any questions or any comments, any suggestions about future happy hours that you guys want us to do, please feel free to type them in the comments box below. And if we're going live, we might be able to have time to address things as things are moving. And if not, then we will get back to you as soon as we can with any answers. And we do love suggestions, so you guys please feel free if you have any topics that you want us to cover. Okay. Also, a little more housekeeping. Please follow us on Instagram as well. We are Coolfish LKN. That's Coolfish Lake Norman. Coolfish at Coolfish LKN, and that will have you guys following us along for any specials, any updates, any news that we have going on, because we love you guys and have to have y'all, okay? So, without any further ado, I think it is time, right? Am I missing anything, Mr. Alex? Okay, I think we're ready then. All right, so let's start with Alex's favorite cocktail, okay? So this one is called a Sazerac. A Sazerac, a little history about this. This is super interesting. Sazerac is arguably one of the oldest cocktails ever. Now, the way that I've heard it is that there's two camps, right? And there's two sort of parties in on this. So one camp says that the Old Fashioned is the oldest cocktail ever, and the other camp says the Sazerac is the oldest cocktail ever. My guess is that there was plenty of others before those two, but that's sort of how the story goes, and I think it's a great story, so we'll go with that. Sazerac originally is from, again, and this is hotly debated, from New Orleans, and right now it is definitely the unofficial official cocktail of New Orleans. This is a really amazing thing. It was invented somewhere around 150 years ago at the Roosevelt Hotel in New Orleans, and originally it was made with cognac. New Orleans being a very heavily French settled colony in the United States. Instead of using cognac today, we're going to use something a little bit different since we're on the eastern side of the South, something that's near and dear to my heart. We're going to use some rye. Okay, so we're going to use some rye whiskey instead of some cognac. So let's get started. So we're going to start this in a double old-fashioned glass or a rocks glass, whatever you want to call it. And so I have put the absinthe in this. This is like a little salad dressing mister, like an olive oil mister. And what this does is this mimics a technique in making cocktails called a rinse. So a lot of people, you probably will recognize this without knowing what it is. It's like when you take vermouth for a martini and you dump it in the glass, rinse it around, and then dump it out. That's a rinse, right? So this is just a bit of a cost-saving, product-saving device. And so we just spray it in the glass, and then that way you don't have to dump anything out, right? And I think it looks cool. But it's hard to see, but there's honestly just a couple of drops in there. And when you're trying to put that little amount of any liquid in a glass, pour spouts can be a little bit clumsy, and to get just a couple of drops in there actually is kind of difficult. So if you just want a little tiny bit, a mister, a salad dressing, mister, whatever you want to call it, is a really great way to save a little bit of money and save products. It always hurts when you're throwing out booze, right? Okay, so now we've got our rinse. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to let this glass start to chill. We're going to put that off to the side. And then I'm going to go in to my mixing glass. Fill that up with a good scoop of ice. And then we're going to use Bullet Rye for this. This is a great whiskey in order to do cocktails with. I love Bullet Rye. It makes an amazing Sazerac. If you have something else laying around the house, a different kind of rye, Rittenhouse, whatever you have, all of those will work. Cognac, like I mentioned earlier, will work. If you have bourbon, okay, you'll get the feel for it. But this definitely is my favorite version of all of it. Okay, so I've got 2 ounces of my Bullet Rye in there. And then next is bitters. Now I'm going to use Angostura bitters. I prefer this. The original recipe calls, I believe, for Peychaud's bitters, which is a little bit different. This one has got a little bit, some more notes of cinnamon and baking spices and things like that in it. But we're going to do 3 good dashes. 1, 2, 3. If you have Peychaud's, by all means use it. Some people use 2 dashes of each, somewhere around there. Any of these bitters will work. If a more flavored bitter will change dramatically the overall taste of the cocktail. So my favorite, again, is something that most people have at home, which is Angostura. Okay? So this is actually almost done already. I have some simple syrup here, and we're just going to simply put in about 1/4 ounce to a 1/2 ounce, depending on how sweet you like things. We're going to put that in our Sazerac as well. Okay? Now it's time to stir. If you want to shake this drink, I would say don't. I definitely think that this is a way better drink when you stir it. That's how the original recipe calls for it. And if you don't have a fancy bar spoon, that's okay. You can use a regular spoon. You can use a knife. The whole thing is what you're trying to do is you're simply trying to bring the temperature down, and you're trying to dilute this a little bit so that all those flavors from the rye and the bitters and the simple syrup sort of all meld together. Okay? So we have all of that ready to go there in our mixing glass, and we have our absinthe rinse glass that is nice. It's nice and cold now. And so we're just simply going to pour that over the rocks. Okay, simple enough, right? All right, one more step. And this is the garnish, and this is key to a Sazerac, all right? This is super, super important as far as I'm concerned. We're going to do a garnish of lemon rind. Okay, so we're just going to take our vegetable peeler. We're going to go from head to toe on a lemon. We've got a nice big fat rind right there, and what we're going to do is we're going to squeeze the lemon rind over the Sazerac, and then that way some of the oil from the lemon shoots out into the drink, and then we're going to rub it around the edge of the glass as well. And this, it's like 2 different cocktails. This is really kind of insane when you try this. So if you guys are following along at home, take a sip of it now, and it's a great drink. But when you put a little bit of this lemon oil into it, it just makes everything pop. It brings everything together, and it really ties the drink in, and it makes it kind of perfect, in my opinion. This is one of my favorite cocktails too. Okay, you ready? So we're just going to give it a little squeeze to express that lemon oil. Rub it around the edge of the glass, and then we're going to plant our flag right in the back, right there, and that's it. Voila, all done. Now it's time to Alex. Alex is over here. I can see he's like ready to jump at it. I'm going to taste it just to make sure that it's okay, Alex, but this definitely is your drink, okay, brother? All right.
Chris, tech support wants to know if there's a local spot to get fancy bar spoons.
Yeah, if you want to go find a local spot, Let's see, in Charlotte, I believe Earl's Grocery has some. Some of the nicer food markets will have them. I've seen bar spoons that maybe not as nice in the grocery stores, some restaurant supply stores. They've got some that will definitely work fine. If you want something fancy, and you're looking for a bar spoon, I would suggest either looking on Amazon, or you can also look on cocktailkingdom.com. Cocktail Kingdom has really nice stuff. It's a little on the pricey side, but if you're willing to invest in some things for your house, they're going to last probably forever if you don't beat them up too bad. So I think it's worth it, and it looks cool. All right, I'm just going to get a little taste here. Man, that's good. Okay, so the Sazerac to me, here you go, Alex. You got to have that. That's good stuff. The Sazerac to me is one of the most perfect cocktails because you can drink it in the winter easy. Like you can happily drink several of these in front of a roaring fireplace, or in a nice cozy bar somewhere in the middle of the winter. I think this works in the summer too. That lemon actually pulls this into a little bit of a brighter place as well. And I think, if you're going to drink whiskey cocktail, like a strong boozy whiskey cocktail, bourbon, rye, whatever you want to call it, you want to drink that in the summertime anyway, then this one plays too. Okay? So again, Sazerac for all seasons, right? Okay, questions, comments, please feel free to jump in. Tech support, I hope I answered your question. Any comments, questions, or suggestions for future shows, please feel free to type them in below, and we will get to them as soon as we can. All right. Alex, what do you think about that one? How's that?
Oh, it's amazing.
Pretty good stuff? I love that cocktail.
Yeah.
So some people, I forgot to mention this earlier, the original recipe calls for it just to be served down. And so up means without ice, like in a stem to drink. Down means like a glass without a stem, but without ice. So original recipe calls for this to be served down, which means without ice, basically, in like an old-fashioned glass. But man, that is such a strong drink that I think that this actually can stand up to some really nice dilution. And I think that from the first sip of your Sazerac to the last sip of your Sazerac, even if it's on ice, that the integrity of the drink holds true the whole time. And so I prefer this one. I think it is even a little bit better with a little bit more dilution. But you can decide for yourself, and don't yell at me if you think it's something different, okay? But I prefer it on ice. Original recipe calls for it to be served down, okay? Fair enough? All right. Okay, so I got one more cocktail for you guys. Again, please feel free to comment or make suggestions on future episodes right down below, and we'll get to you as soon as we can, okay? All right, so we have another common ingredient that we're going to do. The common ingredient that we're using today is absinthe, okay? So for this cocktail, this one is another one of my favorite classics. I love all classics, but this one is near and dear to my heart as well. So this is called the Corpse Reviver number 2. Corpse Reviver number 2. And this one comes out of the Prohibition era, and it was created by a guy named Harry Craddock. Harry Craddock actually was a New York City bartender who, when Prohibition started, he was out of a job. So he packed his bags, picked up, and moved to London, which I think is an incredible story and pretty admirable, especially coming from a bartender. So he found a job at the Savoy Hotel in London, which is still there. It's still one of the nicest hotels in London. And he was instrumental in helping create one of the most well-known cocktail books in history called the Savoy Cocktail Book. And that came out sometime, I believe, in the 30s. So a lot of the recipes in there were created by him and by another bartender or two. And this one, the Corpse Reviver number 2, is, I think it's probably the best name ever, like out of all the cocktail names ever. It's so good that they kept naming them, 2, 3, 4. as they got the same sort of idea of a drink. And the idea of this drink is supposed to be a hair of the dog drink, or a drink that you drink the day after you drank too much, right? So a little something to wake you back up. And the story goes is that if you have a couple of these back to back, that it will bring the dead back to life. Corpse Survivor #2. I know. It's one of my favorite stories ever. All right, Harry Craddock. Well, let's make a drink. So this one is going to be served up. So if you want to take a coupe glass or a martini glass, whatever you have laying around, and we're going to use that same technique that we learned earlier called the rinse. We're going to rinse the absinthe rinse of the glass. If you don't have a spray bottle, that's okay. You just put a couple of drops into the glass. You sort of coat the inside of the glass by rolling it around, and then you dump out almost all of the excess. But this is going to do the same thing, and we don't have to waste any, okay? So, God, you could just smell-o-vision, man. I can't wait till it happens. Absinthe has got this really beautiful anise-flavored licorice, and I didn't grow up liking black jelly beans, but since I've gotten a little bit older, especially since cocktails have become such a huge part of my life, man, that is just a really, really, really amazing smell, and I love it, and I've really got to enjoy the flavor of black licorice, and especially absinthe. So Alex said, if you guys didn't hear that, he asked what the difference was in between that flavor from absinthe and like the flavor of black licorice, like in Sambuca, or those are all like anise flavored sort of liqueurs, anise, anise, anisette. These are all sort of the same things. So they're very, very similar flavors, and I would say that when you get a black licorice or anise flavored liqueur, the difference is going to be something similar to the difference in between Coke and Pepsi. Okay, so it's going to be very, very similar, although there's going to be some minor differences. Sort of like, we talked about this before, our mother's spaghetti recipes, right? Everybody has their own recipe for spaghetti, and it's their favorite. But it's a little bit different than your neighbors, and a little bit different from somebody else, and maybe a little different than your brother makes it or your sister or whatever. And so these things are going to be similar. Some are going to have a little bit more sugar, some a little bit less. But this absinthe is typically pretty close. All absinthe is pretty close to each other, again, within brand exceptions.
When I think of the Sambuca, it's less viscous, it's kind of thicker. Is the absinthe?
I think that, in my opinion, you're right, and somebody might disagree, but I think Sambuca is sweeter. Yeah. I think it's thicker and I think it's the sugar content. So I don't think that absinthe is as sweet. Absinthe is typically super strong also, somewhere from like 110 proof up. You can find some that are a little bit lower. You can find some that are probably up there at 160, 150 somewhere, especially small label versions. You're going to get a wider range of the ABV or the proof or alcohol by volume, whatever you want to call it. But this one is something that we can get here in North Carolina, and this is like the Absinthe, and it's I think it's 110 proof. So that's why you only need a little bit in your glass, because it's so strong in flavor and so strong in proof that you only need just a little bit, just a couple of drops in order to influence your cocktail. If you put too much in there, all of a sudden it's going to take over the whole thing, and you're not going to be able to taste anything except for that black licorice, that anise flavored. And if that's all you want to taste, then you ought to just sip on that by itself. So again, you got to be careful with how much you use. Is that fair? All right. Okay, so let's get back to our Corpse Survivor. That was a great question. So let's put a little ice in our shaker. And then we are going to use some local gin. This is one of my favorites. We've been using this a lot lately, Doc Porter's Gin. They just won the 2020 Charlotte Magazine Best of Award for the distillery. and we're super excited to use our award-winning gin. And there's 2 ounces in there. Okay, next we're going to use some Cointreau. Now Cointreau is, for lack of a better term, it is really nice top-shelf triple sec. This is a French orange liqueur, and I'm going to use about 3/4 of an ounce of that. And then next, this is something that you guys might have to look around for a little bit. You can probably find this at a nice wine shop, or just call before you go over to a wine shop, because this is a little unusual. This is called Le Lait Blanc. This is a French white wine aperitif. And the aperitif means that it's like it's a drink appetizer. An aperitif means it's supposed to encourage your appetite. And so this is just a little bit sweeter than a regular French white wine. And so again, this is something you sip on before appetizers, and then it's going to get your system ready for your first couple of bites. And it also is supposed to encourage your appetite, which I think is totally not necessary in my case. I don't need any encouragement at all. But this is really good, and what this is going to do to our cocktail, this is going to add some sweetness to it, as well as a depth of white wine without going into like a syrup. You don't have to add simple syrup to it in order to get a slight sweetness and some nice depth of white wine to it. Okay, so we're going to use an ounce of that. So last but not least, we're going to use a little bit of fresh squeezed lemon juice. It's very, very important always to fresh squeeze your juice. And we're going to use 1/2 ounce of that. Okay? Now we've got all of our ingredients in there. I don't think I forgot anything. Looks right. That's it. All right, let's give it a quick shake. All right. And then we're going to double strain this into our coupe glass. So you guys have probably seen me use this a lot, and if you missed what this is just a cocoa strainer or a tea strainer. This is going to catch any of those little tiny ice chips that I just broke up while I was shaking the cocktail, or this is going to catch any of the pulp from the lemon juice that we use, because it is fresh squeezed. Okay, so let's just pour that straight into our coupe glass. And remember, there's already a rinse of absinthe in the glass. Clean out our tins. And we're down the home stretch, okay? So we've got all of our ingredients in there, and then once again, we're going to go to our lemon and get a nice rind off of there. We're going to express our lemon over our corpse reviver. Rub that beautiful lemon oil around the lip of the glass. And then plop it down in there. And that's it. Super, super simple. And I think it's necessary to try this one again. Alex, you're going to love this one if you haven't had this before.
I have not.
This is so delicious, and you can understand why people would pound a couple of them the day after drinking too much. Man, that is just smooth. That's really great because the gin, the Doc Porter's gin, which has notes of chamomile tea and cardamom in there, and then of course of juniper, this really complements. The lemon works really well with all those things. And absinthe, the licorice, the black licorice or anise flavor, works amazingly well with lemon as well. So you've got a couple of different flavor profiles that work extremely well together, that are all sort of mixing and intertwining. And I think this is just a really, really beautiful, simple, classic cocktail that, again, is appropriate for any time. This works very well in the spring or summer. However, I don't have any problem with drinking these in the winter either. Okay? Questions, comments, please feel free to type them in below. Of course, we always love suggestions for future happy hours. Please follow us along. Please follow along on Instagram, CoolFishLKN, @CoolFishLKN. What else, Alex? Am I missing anything?
I don't think so.
that might be it for today. Thank you guys very much for stopping by Happy Hour, and we'll see you again tomorrow. And if you happen to miss, we're going to be doing this Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday at 5 o'clock. So hopefully we'll see you tomorrow, but if not, we'll see you on Monday. Thanks, guys.